There is a version of you who finished that thing, the application, the difficult conversation, the project you keep describing as almost ready. That version of you sat down, started, and did not flinch. But you are here instead, watching this. Not because you are lazy, not because you lack discipline. Something else is happening underneath the delay, and it is more uncomfortable to look at than the task itself. Most of us have been told, somewhere along the way, that procrastination is a time management failure. You need a better calendar, a tighter deadline, more willpower, but research from the last 2 decades tells a different story entirely. Procrastination is not about time, it is about emotion. Sirois and Timothy Pychyl, writing in their 2013 paper in the Journal of Rational Emotive and Cognitive Behavior Therapy, described procrastination as primarily an emotion regulation problem. The task is not the obstacle. The feeling the task triggers, inadequacy, boredom, fear of failure, dread of judgment, is the obstacle. Delay is not negligence. It is a coping strategy. This reframe matters more than it might first appear. If you have spent years believing you are simply bad at starting things, you may have been diagnosing the wrong problem entirely. The real question is not what you are avoiding. It is what feeling you are protecting yourself from. That shift in the question changes everything about what you do next. Picture someone sitting at a laptop, the document is open, the cursor blinks, and then, without any conscious decision, they open a different tab, then another. 15 minutes pass, half an hour. The document is still open behind everything else, a low hum of guilt running underneath. This is not a failure of character. This is the nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do, move away from perceived threat. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking Fast and Slow, published in 2011, described the brain's tendency to rely on fast, automatic processing when cognitive demand feels high or emotionally loaded. The task asks something of you: judgment, effort, exposure, and System 1 roots around it before System 2 has a chance to weigh in. The threat here is rarely physical. It is evaluative. What if this is not good enough? What if I start and confirm what I secretly suspect about myself? Timothy Pychyl, in Solving the Procrastination Puzzle, published in 2013, noted that tasks tied to self-concept, creative work, career decisions, important relationships are procrastinated on far more than neutral tasks. The closer the task is to your sense of who you are, the more dangerous it feels to attempt, because attempting means the result can be measured, and measurement feels like verdict. What surprises me most about this finding is how logical the delay becomes when you see it that way. Avoidance is not irrational. It is the brain making a sensible short-term trade. Escape the anxiety now, pay later. The problem is that later always comes. The problem is that later arrives differently than you expect. Sirois, in a 2014 study published in the Journal of Behavioral Medicine, found that chronic procrastinators reported significantly higher stress and worse health outcomes than non-procrastinators. And this was independent of whether they eventually completed the tasks. It was not the undone work creating the damage. It was the ongoing state of suspension, the guilt that accumulates in the space between intention and action. This is where Kierkegaard becomes strangely useful. In The Sickness Unto Death, written in 1849, he described a particular form of despair that comes not from doing wrong, but from failing to become what you sense you could be. He called it the despair of not willing to be oneself. Procrastination lives close to that feeling. You know what the task requires. You know what acting on it would mean for you. And the gap between knowing and not doing generates its own quiet suffering. Viktor Frankl, writing in Man's Search for Meaning in 1946, observed that the tension between what we are and what we feel we ought to be cannot be resolved through distraction, only through engagement. The avoidance does not dissolve the discomfort. It preserves it, sealed, accumulating interest, waiting for you. The pattern tends to tighten over time. Delay produces guilt. Guilt raises the emotional stakes of the task. Higher stakes make the next attempt feel harder. And so the cycle feeds itself quietly in the background of daily life. The solution, it turns out, is not motivation. Waiting to feel ready is another form of delay with better branding. Pychyl's research and subsequent work by Sirois points consistently toward one core intervention: reduce the emotional cost of starting, not the size of the task. This is the real logic behind the advice to work for just 2 minutes, or to make the first step so small it almost feels embarrassing. You are not tricking yourself into productivity, you are lowering the threat level enough that the nervous system stops routing around the work. There is also something important in self-compassion. Neff in Self-Compassion. The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself, published in 2011, found that people who responded to delay with self-criticism went on to procrastinate more in subsequent tasks, not less. Harsh self-judgment increases the emotional cost of returning to difficult work. Gentler self-talk, by contrast, made re-engagement significantly more likely. Being hard on yourself for procrastinating is almost perfectly a reliable way to procrastinate more. The practical shape of this is quieter than most productivity advice. It is not a system. It is a question you ask yourself before you reach for another tab. What feeling am I trying not to have right now? Just naming it takes some of the charge away, not all of it, but enough to sit with the cursor blinking and stay there anyway. That small act of staying, not performing, not producing, just staying, is where the pattern begins to change. It is not dramatic, but it is real. If this kind of careful, research-grounded look at how the mind works is useful to you, there is more here. Subscribing means more of this, not quick fixes, but a slower and more honest map of why we do what we do.